California's been a little bit more stringent and aggressive in pursuing policies that promote housing development and housing supply. One of the examples is SB 9, which really encourages the streamlining of infill development and encourages splitting lots and putting 2 housing units on parcels that are historically have been zoned as single-family housing. So that's just one example of the wave of housing policies that California has produced to increase the supply. One thing I would add too is the regional housing needs assessment, and basically that's a program where the state of California mandates that cities have to provide an ample supply of housing that meets demographic and population growth in the future. But what's imperative about this is that recently, if you're not meeting these housing needs through your housing element, and if the state rejects it, the city could be fined. And also, it can reduce the amount of funding that the state might provide to each city. And more recently, you might have seen this in La Cunada, Flint Ridge, a city can open itself up to litigation if they're not allowing developers to build by right if they haven't been meeting their housing needs. So these are some of the policies that California has produced that are really encouraging the supply and development of housing. One thing that I would add as well is that it really requires a public and private partnership.
So one of the statement that said any quality workforce program or any quality economic development program needs to do 3 things. It needs to be conscious of 3 things. First, it's got to be attentive to income of the workers who are the beneficiaries of the program. That can either be by labor organizing, it can be by living wage activity, it can be just supports for child care, et cetera, but you got to be focused on the income of the workers who are the beneficiary. A little more pedantic, it's about labor supply and demand. So in any labor market, you're going to look at 2 sides of the equation. Who are the workers, the labor supply? You have to invest in thinking about what are the workers, the number of people who are qualifying for jobs, the skills do they bring to the labor market, and then look at the job side. Are you actually having a demand for the labor? And if you don't have a program that is addressing at least 2 or ideally all 3 of those things, you don't actually have anything. You're going to be training people in the abstract, maybe for jobs that aren't really there. You're going to be working with industry that is going to maybe creating jobs for which there is no worker locally to take it, and you start importing labor. And inevitably, you got to be paying people a wage that allows them to live here and meet the standard. Give it in healthcare. Let's use a healthcare example. Actually, Community Memorial Hospital is doing a program currently where you basically say, okay, let's target just an industry, healthcare jobs, and a handful of specific occupations. You want some credible intermediaries to help speak to what do the workers need to advance, but what does the employer need to satisfy their issues, their concerns. So you're going to invest, you're going to bring the education community in, you're going to identify, so you hired somebody as a CNA, entry-level worker, but they have a pathway to become maybe a phlebotomist, an LVN, an RN, and you figure out a career pathway, but what is the educational sort of steps they need to take to get there? Are those jobs in demand? Is the industry having trouble recruiting for them? But ultimately, you want to change the conditions systemically about how the industry, labor, and education, the 3 elements of any workforce program, work together. We don't do enough of that. We tend to train people in the abstract, in the education community. We're a little too abstract. We're not really career-oriented. We need to do a lot more of that. But also, business isn't usually looking at its own interests effectively. They think labor is an expense, that human capital actually isn't capital. So, but an industry sector program actually says, hey, maybe investing in the skills of workers is both good for the worker and for my business and the industry as a whole. And there aren't enough of those, but there are several good examples, and we could talk about more of them. But there are examples, there are pathways that actually do both good for workers, business, and the community.
Has made a lot of investments in the community. So I want to ask Vanessa, what sort of scholarships and funds are available now to vulnerable groups in Ventura County through VCCF? And how do you make sure that these opportunities are visible and available and inclusive?
Thank you so much. First of all, I just want to share that there's absolutely no way I could ever do this work alone, and I'm thankfully surrounded by not only a community of 23,000 living donors and generations of people who have come before, but I also have one of the most wonderful board of directors, including Dr. Cesar Morales, Mike Janusik, Leah Lacayo, Catherine Sepulveda, our past board member, Mike Zlachy back there, and I just want to share, there's a lot of you here, and I really want to say thank you. Coming back to two things. Number one, we are in the community foundation world. And what is a community foundation? It's the democratization of philanthropy. Every single person has a place at the community foundation.